A relationship is like a dance. It takes two to tango. Want to have healthy and successful relationships filled with passion, fun, and harmony? Hi, and welcome to the Two to Tango Show with Linda Sutton, a podcast that explores how we can improve your relationships with God, yourself, your intimate partners, and the community. Tune in and learn actionable insights and tips you can use to improve your relationships. The battle of the sexes ends here. Join Linda Sutton today and take your relationships to a whole new level while having fun every step of the way.
Welcome to the Two to Tango Show, where our role and our goal is to assist you with all of your relationships, from your relationship with God and self, intimate partner and family, community, nature, and nations. Hi, I am your host and usually doing the most, Linda Sutton, and today we are continuing in our serial of Anatomy of a Tango with our focus today on the principles, or as I like to say, the rules that govern the roles. Now, if you've missed the previous episodes of the Anatomy of a Tango in this series, you definitely want to go back and check out the previous podcast where we are taking kind of a closer look, a more intimate look and deeper dive on the elements that make up the anatomy of a tango. And so at the top of this serial, I outlined the 6 major components or elements that make up the anatomy of the tango. And those are the leader and the follower, the embrace, the principles or the rules that govern the roles, which we'll be focused on today, the music, and the environment. And actually those in reverse orders, the environment and the music. So those elements are kind of the big overarching ideas that when they all come together, it creates the thing that we know as the tango or tango. Now, this is pretty exciting because I had mentioned in a previous episode that the principles, the reason that I focus on the principles as opposed to the steps or the figures, which is the kind of the combinations of steps that make up an idea. The reason that I focus on the principles is because the figures or the steps and the figures are an outcome, or they are a result of successfully executing the principles. So if you and your partner are successful in the execution of these principles and you're consistently executing them, then the result that you will see will be the steps and then the figures. And then if you were doing performances, the choreography. So those are kind of a result. The cause, the thing that makes it happen is the principles, the rules that govern what needs to happen. And then when that's done successfully, the steps are what you see as a result. Now, I typically at the top of these episodes like to just kind of get into the pure definition, because the pure definition of the term often, or the terms often, give us a real insight and revelation into what we should really be doing. It gives us the full context of what's going on. And a principle, we might be thinking of like principles, like what do you mean principles? Some people may be thinking like principle as it relates to the leader of a school or school system. Someone else might think of principle, when they think of principle, they may think of the founding party of a business. Well, here we're using principle in a different context, and we're using principle as a fundamental truth or rule that governs your or a behavior. So it's the truth or a rule that governs behavior. It governs what you do. So that is what we're looking at in terms of principle, and that is what we're talking about here. Like I say so playfully all the time, is the rules that govern the roles. And remember, the 2 roles that are in the anatomy of the tango are the leader and the follower. Now, one of the reasons that I'm kind of doing a little bit of a review, because we did cover a number of the roles and responsibilities of each of the corresponding roles. So if you missed that, you definitely want to go back and look at the episode where we're discussing in great deal what it means to be a leader and what it means to be a follower in the tango. And so we talk about the roles and the responsibilities of those two roles in the couple. And so that should give you those details. The principles are the next level that gives a context on how the embrace works. Okay, so you have the leader and you have the follower, and what binds them together or what brings them together is the embrace. So the embrace is kind of the fundamental structuring unit of the couple, because it's what connects them. And then once they become connected, once they become committed to being in partnership with one another, then the principles are the things that are in play that make that system work, if you will. So the coming together of the two individuals in the embrace creates the partnership, creates the couple, and then the principles govern how that couple is now going to function together as a unit. Remember, but there is no leader without a follower. Both roles in the dance are comparable and complementary. They are opposite but complementary, and they are equal in value in the couple. One cannot exist without the other. So there is not a hierarchy in the dance. They are like opposite one another, as Miss Gallagher taught us in terms of what those terms mean. So they are equal in value and complementary. Now, this was beautiful because when we talk about principles, there's a lot of things that are at play here when the couple is working together in this partnership. And I remember one particular opportunity and one particular time I was working with a gentleman that I was a professional partner. So we were performing and teaching together. And we were having a big debate and discussion. We would often, during our own training sessions and rehearsals and preparation for teaching workshops or seminars or camps, we would kind of discuss different elements and how we were going to best translate those elements or teach those elements or discover new ways of exploring those elements to bring to our students. And on this particular occasion, we were talking about elements as it relates to balance and access of the woman or the follower. And so we were having a little bit of nuance going back and forth about a particular set of concepts around that. And I remember saying to him in a very offhanded manner that I understood why he had the perspective that he had about that particular element around following, but there was a big piece of his experience that was missing. Now, of course, he didn't take that well at first, and I didn't necessarily mean it in a negative way, but I was just, just kind of sharing with him my perspective. And he was like, well, what do you mean by that? I was like, well, when you add the element of wearing high heels to the dynamic of balance and axis, a woman's axis, the whole dynamic changes depending on her heel height. And that her heel height actually comes into play when it comes to issues of balance and axis, because depending on her level of comfort or proficiency, not just in walking, but in dancing, if she may be comfortable dancing in a certain heel height, but she may be comfortable walking in a certain heel height, but she may not be as comfortable in her balance dancing. So, we were going back and forth about that. And he was a very proficient follower as well as a leader, as am I. I'm a very proficient leader as well as a follower. And so, he kind of scoffed at that a little bit. And I was like, Chad, you don't know what it means to wear heels. So, you're always going to be missing that perspective, that experience. And so I had some old heels and he was like, well, don't ever tell nobody I don't do that. But he's like, it can't be that different. And so I just kind of shook my head. So I had some old heels that I was about to discard. And I was like, well, just put them on for a minute, just so that you can get the experience of what happens when you shift kind of your heel height and therefore your axis. So he actually did put them on for just a brief moment. And I tried to lead him, and just in the matter of not even a full song, after that, he was just kind of like, I I totally get what you're saying. Like that is just an experience in a realm all its own. He kind of had an all hail to the queen moment. He was like, I will just defer to you when it comes to kind of those nuances. And so it was beautiful because he had a new respect for my experience inside of the dance that he didn't have before. He had made assumptions about what that experience was like because he did have experience in following, but there was what appeared to him to be a small distinction in terms of the fact that even though he was a male follower, that he didn't wear heels, that it didn't have such a big deal. It actually was significant when you start talking about ideas of adding momentum and dynamic to the dance. And so whenever we would go into sessions, he might be coaching some ladies or whatever, but then he would always come back to me and say, okay, is there anything I'm missing? Is there anything that I'm overlooking? Is there anything that I'm not catching? Is there anything that's not in my awareness? Is there anything that I don't know as it relates to these particular set of issues in coaching followers? And so it was very, very beautiful because, you know, he would seek additional information. He would seek additional perspective. He would seek additional insight and even more insight as a leader, even though we were both professionals at that time. Just kind of some of the nuances, the really, really refined and fine elements. He began to seek even more details as it relates to that. We even began to play with kind of how the dynamic of our dance would change as I changed heel height, for example, because I was very used to wearing, by that time I trained myself up to wearing 4-inch heels. And so we began to play with that. I shared all that to say is that, I really want to underscore, as I like to say, the idea of understanding that both sides of the dance are equal in value. And when you have a respect and regard for the opposing role, even though you may have some assumptions about its level of ease or its level of difficulty or whatever from your perspective, even if you believe that your assumptions are correct, if you just kind of open yourself up and become available to the fact that there might be things about the other side of the dance that are equally as valuable, equally as challenging, having as much insight as your side of the dance, and you can really seek to communicate with your partner, not only to understand their perspective, their side, but also use that information to get a new and deeper and more refined perspective and a more refined level of mastery of your own experience. So it happened in our dance, but I wanted you to think about that in your relationship. For example, you see this in partnerships where sometimes every once in a while you might see a show like a Lifetime show, a Lifetime show, where a gentleman may be working outside of the home and he has a very frustrating day or a week or month or year, and his wife might be a stay-at-home mom. And there's kind of this tug of war when he comes home one day and he just doesn't have an appreciation of the fact that she's at home. He's like, well, I'm at work all day out here making money and putting the roof over her head or whatever. And all you do is sit at home all day. And I'm sure if you haven't seen one of those kind of examples of a breakdown in communication, just take yourself right on over to YouTube. And I'm sure if you do a search of that, you will find you a little video of that dramatization. And then there's some sort of example where they trade places and the gentleman gets an opportunity to kind of take over and be the mom for the day or be the wife for the day, and realizes that her job is not as easy as he thought it was. And in fact, that he realizes that it's much, much harder than he ever realized. And equally, the partner, they may have an experience or understanding that their partner's role. They may think all you do is go to meetings and sit at your desk all day, and might not realize that there is all these other dynamics of supervision and coaching and things like that your partner might be doing, that you might have a more appreciation of once you had an experience understanding of how challenging or taxing that work was. So I use these two stories to kind of set the stage, because the principles, each principle has two corresponding elements that must work together in concert with one another. So as I lay out the principles, I'm going to lay out the principles in the terms of leader and follower, but you will see very quickly that they actually correspond to one another, that they're actually complementary in nature. And so this principle that is on the leader side has a corresponding element and principle component of that principle on the follower side. So it's one principle, but there's two components, and each party is responsible for a component of that principle that mirrors the other. So coming back to the top of it, we talked about leader, we talked about follower, we talked about the embrace, and now we understand that when the two come together, they are now a unit. The two become one. So this is the place. This is the place where the whole idea that in Tango, two become one, in a relationship or a marriage, two become one. This is where you see the physical manifestation of that idea, that saying, that proverb, that thought. This is where you see it. You have a leader and a follower, the two. Once they come into the embrace and they agree to become partners and a couple, then they become one unit. They become one system that has to work together, and they work as parts of that whole in concert with one another so that the whole can move and operate through space and time. So this is where you see that. So it really is an element of two becoming one. There is a move once there is an agreement to come into partnership with your partner. The first overarching idea is that you are no longer in a space of independence, but as you move from individual to couple and partnership, you move from a state of independence to a state of interdependence. Those two things are actually diametrically opposed. I know that's going to be very unpopular in this day and age where people say, you have two individuals in a couple and you maintain your own separate identities and that whole thing and whatever. And I understand that there is value in maintaining things that are important to you, but you have to understand that once you cross over that threshold and that agreement of partnership, independence gives way to interdependence. And the reason why is that for that unit to work, there is another set of principles that take over, okay, that become your governing principles. You as an independent person have one set of governing principles. Those governing principles no longer exist when you are in partnership or a part of a system, because you now are a part of things that must work together in order to make that larger entity work. Okay, so the overarching theme, once again, is you move from independence to interdependence. And then all of the principles that govern how the couple works and how it works successfully are with this understanding that you are in a state of interdependence with your partner, okay? That's what you're doing. You're working in concert with one another. Once again, all the parts of the whole, the leader and the follower, must work together in tandem in a certain way for the unit to move forward. So not only are the leader and follower doing their respective parts, fulfilling their respective roles, but they're occurring simultaneously, or at least in tandem. It might be in a sense you may perceive it to be chronological in order. And I mean, on the outside looking in, it appears to be linear or chronological, but actually those two elements, the principles, the corresponding principles, are working in tandem with one another. One kind of analogy or picture that you might want to have in your head, because you're like, Linda, this seems a little abstract. Like, okay, give me something else that tangible that I can think of that might help me to better understand that. Well, think about a car. And every car has all of these moving parts that work together so that the car can move in space and time. So you have passengers inside of the car, and then you have the car that is moving. And so these parts are working interdependently together so that the car moves. because they're a part of the larger body of the car, any one of them doesn't function anymore outside of the car. So a car battery needs to be inside of a car in order to power the car. It by itself doesn't have any full function because it is created and is designed to be a part of the car and helps to power the car and helps it to move. So that should help you understand in terms of you are parts of a whole, and the goal is for the whole thing, this new thing that is created, to work and function. Another way of looking at it is lock and key, and you move from one space into another space. That lock and key, once it comes together, it opens up a new environment. It makes another environment available to you all. And so you go from one room into the next. And so that is a part of that can help you. And so the man and the woman come together like a lock and key to have greater access to something else. All right. So now, when we talk about leader and follower, there are already some things that are inherent in just the very name of what they are, the kind of assignment that they have. And so, but the principles are the elements that come together, that each one of them is doing together in concert, that makes up the principle as opposed to just the role and responsibility. Now, before we get into kind of the two columns, if you will, of leader and follower, I want to make sure, because you know that in this show, we always want to draw a relationship, or we're always attempting to draw a relationship between the things that we see on the dance floor and the obvious places where we see that it exists in relationships. And so the principles and this idea of principles can be very readily seen in the biology of a man and woman. So they're actually biological corresponding factors that are represented in these principles. And what am I talking about? As they say, let me make it plain, baby, let me make it plain. So in the act of sex or intimacy between a man and a woman, there are biological corresponding factors that come into play that we will see in the dance. In the biological act of intimacy or sex, anatomically, the man and the woman have two different designs that come together, that are designed to come together and work in concert with one another to have a function, which is not just pleasure, but to procreate. So the man anatomically is designed to give to the woman, and the woman is anatomically designed to receive from the man. And when those two things happen together simultaneously, then the larger body of the creation of the family, of course, pleasure and procreation becomes available or happens. So the access to ability to be able to procreate becomes available, like I said in the lock and key analogy, or it actually does, and procreation occurs and the creation of life or the ushering in of new life occurs. So there's an actual anatomical design that is inherent within a man and a woman in terms of how they fit together in order to come together to create a unit, to create the unit that is the couple, and then that couple creates the fundamental baseline element, or they say the singular unit of community, which is family. And I've said before, I believe that the fundamental unit of community is the couple, because out of the couple comes the family. But in social sciences, they say the fundamental unit of society is the family. Well, guess what? The man and the woman, they come together, they procreate, and that unit, that thing that they create now in concert with one another is the family unit. All right. The thing that binds it is the commitment, and we've said previously before that is usually in the form of the covenant or the marriage, but once they come together, they are a unit. Now, I know that socially and societally, people come in and out of relationships, and families do break apart, divorces do happen, but because if they've created children together, they will always be the parents of those children. Technically, the unit always exists. It may not exist in the form that it was designed to exist as, which is all under the same roof, but the family structure doesn't disintegrate just because the social covenant and commitment is broken. There's still connection. There was something that was still created, and both of those parts are still needed in order to nurture and care for what was created out of that union successfully. Now, it was originally designed to all be in the same space, and there's reasons for that. Regardless of what's going on culturally and societally, there is actually reasons for it. Just like there is an anatomical design for the coming together, there is a design that, you know, governs why that makes sense, but that's to be discussed at another time. But I do want to acknowledge that. Not only are the man and the woman, their reproductive organs designed to come together and work in concert with one another, but the other biological systems come and start to work as well. The biological systems of the endocrine system gets involved, not just the reproductive, the endocrine system, the nervous system, the circulatory system, your musculoskeletal system. I think the only body system that is not directly involved, I think, depending, is the digestive system, but the entire set of body systems is also participating in this process of the act of intimacy and the act of sex. And so this kind of whole being understanding of the fact that when you are in the act of intimacy and sex, every part of you participates in that, then some of the requirements that you see show up in the dance when the two engage, and the fact that it requires so much of you will actually make sense now that you have that context. Awesome. So now we've had a moment to really kind of talk to that. And I know it's delicate to talk about the sexual act and the act of intimacy, but the reason that it's important to have that backdrop and that understanding is because some of the elements and issues that come up as you participate in the principles of the dance will make complete sense once you kind of draw the parallels between that and the leading and following and the giving and the receiving. Another thing that I do want to highlight, once again, is very, very delicate since we're talking about the act of intimacy and the act of sexual intercourse, is that not only do we have this kind of biological, biochemical response that comes together and the man and the woman having their corresponding roles and functions in that interaction, but you also have to understand, once again, when I talk about the anatomical design and that the man's anatomy is designed to give and the woman's anatomy is designed to receive that thing. So the man has his reproductive organ and its design, purpose, and function. One of them is to be able to be the corresponding organ to the woman's reproductive organ. And that literally, that the woman's anatomical design is designed to receive the organ, the biological organ, a body part, an organ of another person inside of them. Now, that is just really profound. I think we kind of gloss over that, but that is a reality that we really, really want to look at, especially because, like I said, in the dance, when we start talking about giving and receiving, we will see why some of the issues arise up when that doesn't, why certain issues arise when that is not working well. So a woman's body is designed to actually receive and accommodate another person's body part inside of her body. And correspondingly, a man's body part, a literal part of his body, is designed to be inside of another person's body. Like, that is the ultimate act of giving, receiving, lock and key, connection, sharing, and becoming one unit. It is the ultimate act of becoming one unit. And even though we perceive it to be a temporary coming together, once again, like in the embrace, once you come together, you are becoming a system. that is one of those places where you see man and woman coming together, not only to become man and wife, but also to literally become a system for procreation, a system for not only creating together literally, but creating together figuratively in the world around them and in the community around them. So we've talked about when two become one, they become one system. And we talked about how one of the overarching principles that kind of governs the system is that independence gives way to interdependence. There are also two other points of system that come into play once they become connected. And that is the points of connection and the points of transfer. So the points of connection means the literal places on the body where the embrace occurs, because information and energy travels through that point of connection. So the way that you come into the embrace, that is a place of connection, is information, kind of like the cell phone. It's the way the communication goes back and forth in terms of giving details. The energy is done through points of transfer. So the power that governs the couple or propels the couple comes through the sternum or the breastplate and the core or the belly button. So those are the two places of transfer. So those are responsible primarily for transferring the energy from one partner to the next. And then the specific directions or instructions on how that energy is supposed to move through space and time, what direction, through, and what kind of momentum, what kind of dynamic that energy is supposed to move, that occurs through the points of connection or the embrace. Okay, I use the word energy a lot, and I don't mean energy in some sort of woo-woo kind of abstract concept. The idea of energy is literally the force or power that the man is using to carry the couple through space and time. And so now we're going to get into kind of the elements that govern, or the parts of the principle that govern the leader. And then we'll come back and talk about the corresponding element on the follower side. So the number one rule of the leader, we talked about that. His number one rule, his number one governing principle that governs his behavior is to keep the lady safe, to keep the woman safe. Everything that he does needs to do that. So he needs to be able to keep her safe. So everything that he does out of that, everything that is born out of that, facilitates her being safe and the couple being safe, of course, ultimately. But his role and his goal is to keep her safe. And so all of his decisions are with that in mind. If there's any decision that might compromise her safety, both physical or emotional, then his responsibility to keep her safe is the decision that has the highest priority always in the couple. And so when he's moving and he's making decisions, that is the highest priority. That's the number one rule. So if he has to make a choice and one will compromise her safety, both either physical or emotion, then the default is always, nope, whatever is going to keep her safe physically and emotionally, that is his choice. That becomes his choice. The gentleman spends 90% of his time walking forward. Okay, so like we talk about the car analogy, and no, she should not remind you of her Jeep. He's like, she remind me of my Jeep. No, she's not the Jeep. But I do like to use those kind of driving analogies because there is a flow of traffic on the dance floor. Remember, we talked about in the anatomy of a tango, we talked about the environment and the fact that the environment, the dance moves, is a progressive dance in a counterclockwise fashion. And so the gentleman is moving in the flow of traffic and he's facing in the flow of traffic. So he's spending 90% of his time walking forward. And so that's really important because he is moving the couple forward, just like his safety is and moving in the flow of traffic. When he's driving, it keeps the passengers in the car safe, and it keeps the car intact, and it keeps also the other cars on the road safe, as long as he's moving easily in the flow of traffic. He rarely is going to go against the flow of traffic, because going against the flow of traffic, he could compromise not only the safety of everyone in the car, compromise the car, but he could also compromise the safety and well-being of any cars that's traveling behind him at any point in time. So it's the same way on the floor. I call it tango tickets. When a gentleman has moving violations on the dance floor, then if you're going to be in one of my sessions, you are going to get a tango ticket for your moving violations. So wonderful. Now, the gentleman, one of the principles that governs the gentleman, and we talked about points of connection, is that the leader or the gentleman is responsible for establishing the connection. Once the follower steps in front of you, and we talked about that in the anatomy of the tango, the embrace part of it. Once she gives you a clear indication of what she's comfortable with, then you use that information to establish the embrace, to bring her into your arms and establish the embrace. And once you bring her into your arms, based on your height, based on what's comfortable, what you all have decided non-verbally, then she is going to put herself to fit comfortably inside of your arms based on the embrace type that you all chose. The gentleman is not only responsible for establishing the connection, but he also is responsible for sustaining, or when I say sustain, strengthening the connection. So as the couple moves through space and time, he's going to be constantly making adjustments and course corrections in terms of their dance, in terms of the embrace, in terms of the momentum and how he's navigating. And so as he goes through that process, he also wants to be strengthening and fortifying the connection that he created at the beginning. So it's, even though he starts with a certain type of connection in the beginning, as he moves through space and time, he may have to make adjustments in order to facilitate the ease of movement of the couple. And also as they get to know each other better, as she gets more and more comfortable with him, as he gets more and more comfortable reading her, and vice versa, then they both can make adjustments, and then he can strengthen and fortify the connection. The gentleman is also responsible for providing support. He is responsible for providing support, and providing support consistently for the lady's body, and more specifically her body weight. Okay, so when she gives him her body weight, she is not just giving him her weight physically. She is also giving him an emotional weight. And what I mean by that is, in order to give her physical weight and surrender to his lead, that requires an element of trust on her part. And so she is surrendering to him through her giving him kind of this emotional weight of trust. So she's trusting him, and she's entrusting him with her safety and well-being. So he's not only is she trusting him, but she's entrusting him with her safety and well-being. Even if it's for a few minutes, it doesn't matter. That is a really big issue for women, because so many things can go wrong in a short period of time, as I've said previously, that that kind of issues of trust and entrusting are really, really big. And so he must provide support and consistency so that she can continue to grow in her trust with him, and continue to entrust him with more and more of herself. The gentleman must give enough energy and power and impulse to move the couple through space and time. And this is probably the biggest quantum leaps that a gentleman goes through in the dance, other than the safety piece. So, I know that my experience in coaching gentlemen in the dance is that they have an intellectual understanding of what it means to be a leader in the dance, but the experience of having to lead a woman and all that comes with that, is a whole nother dynamic. And so, I find that when I'm working with gentlemen, a lot of them start out and they're like, yeah, okay, she's pretty, or I like her, and this is gonna be a walk in the park, and I'm gonna impress her with my moves and this and these are the things that are going on in their head. And then when they actually have to get her in the embrace and they realize the responsibility for her safety is in his arms and in his hands right then, and he actually is having to navigate and negotiate that on the floor, it becomes a whole nother experience. Like the enormity of that responsibility and what that really means, the experience of that, the feeling her in his arms, the feeling her response, the feeling of her uncertainty in his arms, like he understands it in a totally different way. Well, power and force and impulse also becomes a kind of second elements that I see when I'm coaching gentlemen, where it becomes like this big light bulb, this big, not only aha, but this big transformational moment for gentlemen when they are understanding what it means to become a leader. And the reason why this becomes such a transformational moment is because most men and gentlemen as leaders, before they step fully into what it means to be a leader, is that they're very comfortable with the idea of moving themselves through space and time, taking care of themselves, handling their business. So they're very comfortable with the idea of propelling themselves, even something as simple as the act of walking. Like, I got this. They've got their stride, they've got their swag, they've got their jinga, as they say in Kizomba or Capoeira. Like, the man has his swagger, his jinga. He's got the way that he rolls through space and time. And so he's very, very comfortable with that. But then in the Tango, when he takes on the responsibility of taking on a partner, he has to generate an exponential level of force, because he not only has to move himself through space and time, but now he has to move her through space and time. So he's got to actually move both of them now through space and time. So he's responsible for moving her through space and time as well. And the amount of power that is needed to move you as a unit is very different and vastly different than just moving yourself through space and time. And it's more than just the amount, the quantity of power that is needed, but because the unit, the physical structure of the unit as two people is different than one individual walking forward, because now you have two individuals that are focused in literally walking or facing in opposite directions. And one that is, both of them that are normally walking forwards, now one of them is actually tasked with walking backwards. So the amount of energy and force, not only in terms of quantity, but also the quality of power, the type of power he has to bring is vastly different, because now his partner is not only trusting him, but his partner is having to walk backwards in high heels oftentimes. And so there's all of that dynamic in play. And so how he moves through space, even how he walks, has to change, because it has to take all of these new elements into account. The way he holds his body even has to completely change in order to hold her body weight and still be moving forward, to support her body against his, but still be walking in the opposite direction. Like, it's really, really profound. And I love watching gentlemen come into the awareness of what that means. And also, because they come into that new awareness, they also come into a different understanding of what power means. And they realize that power is a whole different dynamic than they ever thought of before when it comes to leadership. So the gentleman is not only given enough power to move the couple through space and time, but the gentleman now has to support, transfer, and move her weight. So we've already kind of given some imagery on what that means in terms of moving the woman through space and time, especially since we understand now that the woman is walking backwards. And walking backwards is simply, even with the most practiced of followers, is not a natural thing. A woman will usually only find herself walking backwards for a prolonged period of time when she's dancing. outside of the dance space, even if she's training, she still is spending 99% of her time in life walking forwards. And so even to train your body to walk backwards for minutes or hours at a time requires a complete reorientation of yourself and literally a disorientation from what is actually very natural and second in nature to you. Because remember, we've been walking since we were children, since we've took our first steps. That is literally a natural kind of automatic thing. There's an automatic way that we move through space and time that the woman has to override just to be in the dance. And when a gentleman understands that she literally has to override her very nature in terms of movement in order to agree to be in the embrace, there can be a new level of respect and regard of what she has to go through mentally, psychologically, and physically just to stay engaged in the embrace and to have her weight supported, to have her weight transferred, to have her weight moved by somebody else, to have someone else in charge and guiding her weight and her body through space and time without her initiating it. Okay. Another principle that governs the gentleman, and I say this a lot, you'll hear me say this a lot, is lead and then follow your lead. It's like speaking and then listening and to make sure that who you're communicating with is understanding and hearing what you're saying, and then giving them an opportunity to contribute to the conversation. So in a typical verbal conversation, a healthy conversation invites participation by both parties. The man, in this case, because he initiates, he's speaking. He's looking to see if the woman understands what he says. And then he gives her an opportunity to contribute or offer feedback to him, and then also contribute to the conversation herself. Well, you see that circular movement of information, energy, and communication in the dance, and it's all nonverbal, but you see that. So the gentleman is also leading, and then following his lead is the other parts that I was just talking about, making sure there's understanding, seeking feedback, and then inviting contribution, a creative contribution by your follower or your partner for the next phase or step of the dance. The man as a leader, is already the person who starts and initiates the dance itself. So by inviting the woman, he is the one who starts and initiates the kind of the coming together of the couple. But the gentleman is also responsible for starting and initiating the actual movement of the steps in the first place in the dance, the beginning of the movement of creating the figures. And so it's important to understand that so that the lady understands that she is the effect of the cause of him. And so she's not to initiate, she's not to get ahead, she's not, as we say, to back lead. So that's something that is the responsibility of the gentleman. The gentleman is not only initiating the movement, but he starts to initiate the ideas, which is the figures. And so he is responsible for initiating the ideas, and then she's responsible for being a demonstration of those ideas and also contributing creatively to those ideas. The gentleman is responsible for navigating on the floor. And like I said, that means the rules of the road, adhering to the rules of the road. Every once in a while, the gentleman might change directions for a brief period of time, just like you might see on the road in terms of a U-turn or something like that. But usually that is an occurrence that should not occur that often for the safety of all involved. It's really important for the gentleman to make sure that he's not only navigating the couple to have fun, but he's being aware of all the other couples on the floor as well. The gentleman creates, and he co-creates with his partner. And that's why, and once he leads, then he's looking for not only feedback, but he's also inviting the contribution or response of his partner. And that is what makes the dance co-creative in nature. And then the last principle that the gentleman must understand, other than the listening that we just talked about, is that he is leading one step at a time. So a gentleman may have vast vocabulary and all these steps that he wants to try. He's like, yeah, I'm gonna try on the floor. I'm gonna press her with that, and I'm gonna press that with him. And my boys are gonna be like, oh, when you learn that new step, I learned that new step watching that video or going to that workshop or whatever, what have you. But it's really, really important that the leader becomes very present moment aware. The gentleman must be in the moment because he can only lead one step at a time. Even though the figures and the choreography is a series of steps that make up that final idea that we know of as a figure or choreography, it's really, really important that the gentleman stay focused on leading one step at a time and listening through that process. Sure, he may need to do things to set up the next idea, but he doesn't want to get ahead of himself. Why? Because the dynamic and the conditions of the room are constantly changing. Other leaders are changing ideas and coming up with new ideas and having their own conversations. So even though a gentleman may have an idea, say that he wants to lead an ocho on the floor, he may start leading an ocho, and then halfway through leading that step or that figure, someone might step in the way, or another couple might change directions in a way where he cannot finish leading that figure because there's somebody else in that space at the time. So either he has to pause, or he has to reverse or lead something different because he no longer has the space available or the conditions for leading that particular figure or idea are no longer available. So the gentleman has to be very, very flexible. And the only way that he can be flexible is to really stay in the moment with his partner, that he stays really present moment aware. And from moment to moment, as he's leading, he's paying attention to what's going on with him, what's going on with his partner, what's going on with the floor. And he's making, as I've said before, the adjustments and the course corrections that are necessary in order for them to be able to negotiate and navigate the entire experience and still have fun every step of the way. Awesome. So we've been talking about the principles and the corresponding principles that govern the man's part of the dance, or the leader's part of the dance. And so now let's talk about the follower's role and the principles that govern the follower in this unit that we call the couple, and this unit that we call partnership. And I love this because we've covered quite a few of them, just kind of in going through the leaders, the principles that govern the leaders. But let's kind of pivot a little bit and talk about the principles that govern the follower. Follow me. Follow me, follow me, for my old house heads. So the number one principle that governs the follower's role, and I love this, is one of my favorite phrases, is I tell my ladies when I'm coaching them, I'm like, your number one goal in your role is once the gentleman has established the connection, you stay with your man like white on rice. That's her goal. That's her role. That's her governing principle. Her governing principle is once they've established the connection, is her number one rule is to stay with her man. Meaning her goal is to, now that she has agreed, and all that is involved with agreeing to be in partnership with the man, agreeing to his lead, to receive his lead, agreeing to surrender to his lead, agreeing to reorient herself to no longer be facing in the flow of things, but to be facing away from the flow of traffic, and agreeing to trust and entrust him with her safety and well-being, agreeing to be in close proximity with him, agreeing to completely reorient the way that she understands moving through space and time, to walk backwards in potentially high heels for long periods of time, doing something that is just simply not natural to any woman. Once she has agreed to do all of those things, and some of those things requiring her to literally override things that are normally more natural to her, to receive his energy, receive the energy that he's given, to receive the lead that he's given. Once she's agreed to that, the way that she is able to maintain that agreement is by staying in partnership with him. So she has to take on a different understanding of interdependence, because interdependence requires a reorientation on her part that is different from the reorientation that is required from the gentleman. They both are requiring, substantially different, substantially profound shifts, tremendous shifts in their understanding of the world and how they move in the world as they move from independence to interdependence. But she also has to take on a different step, because she has to reorient her direction. Okay, so her literal physical body has to be reoriented to move in a direction that's against the way that she normally moves, anywhere from 95 to 99% of the time. Okay, so it's really, really important that the gentleman is sensitive to that, because that's a process that requires training. That's a process that she has to grow into, and it's something that she has to constantly be working on and working towards, in order to continue to stay in that physical state as well as that state of mind. So her number one role is to stay with the man. So once they establish the connection, she is there to maintain the connection. That's her role. That's the only way that the interdependence can continue to exist, is after that she's made the agreement that she continues to maintain the connection. Now, the responsibility for sustaining or strengthening that connection is on the leader, because the leader is the one that's responsible and tasked with making adjustments and course corrections based on his observation of everything that's going on, and the fact that he's responsible for navigating and negotiating them through space and time. So she is there to enable it, to keep it the same, to make sure that it's to keep it going, to allowing it to continue. And then the next step for him is to sustain it. So that's the corresponding. He establishes the connection, she maintains the connection, she enables it to still continue to occur, and then he sustains and strengthens it. And so that's the cycle of that particular principle. He provides support for her consistently, and the lady's principle is that she surrenders her weight to support and lead. And we talked about that before. So he provides the support with his body physically, and he also provides support to her emotionally through giving her a sense of safety in the embrace, letting her know that she can trust him. And so she surrenders her weight to his lead and his support, and trusting him and entrusting him with her well-being and safety, both physically and emotionally, because there's a lot of trust that's involved. As I say, copious amounts of trust that's involved in allowing someone else to be have that level of trust, and trusting that level of your well-being to them, especially in this kind of dance. The gentleman, once again, he's responsible for giving enough energy and power and impulse to move the couple. Her corresponding element of that principle is to receive all of that energy and allow it to flow through her. So the energy of the man, the force, flows to her, and then it literally flows through her body and makes her body to move in ways that result in the figures or steps that we see. So he leads it, and then the force that's coming through her body creates these results. It creates these outcomes in the forms of steps and other movements. And the only way that occurs is because she allows it freely to flow through her body and allow that outcome to be a manifestation of the energy that she's experiencing coming in and through her body. Now, remember at the top of the podcast in this episode, I talked about the anatomical correspondence there and how intimate that is, because the gentleman is designed anatomically to give and the woman is designed to receive, and how much intimacy and how much trust occurs in the act of giving and receiving when they come together physically. Well, you can see just as profound and just as significant a level of intimacy when you have that exchange of giving and receiving energy. For some people, it's even more intimate experientially than sex, to actually receive all of someone's energy, let it flow through your body, and then manifest it in the way that it shows up in terms of figures and dance steps and movement through space and time. So that's her corresponding. She has to allow it to flow, and allow it to flow unhindered and uninhibited. The more unhindered and uninhibited she allows that energy to flow through her, the more beautiful and more accurate the dance, and the more in sync the couple is. And so that's why that trust and the entrusting is so significant, because the level of trust that she has in him is kind of sets the stage for how freely his energy is allowed to flow through her without any resistance. He's responsible for supporting, transferring, moving her weight, and her corresponding role is to allow that. She's also to be sensitive to what he's doing, the nuance of what he's doing, and allowing it to flow accurately. And what do I mean when I say letting it flow accurately? Is because she is responsible for being responsive and sensitive to the instructions and information that's coming through. And sometimes that can be a challenge for ladies, because ladies have this nurturing, loving spirit that wants the man to be successful. So many women want their man to be, whether he's friend or just colleague or their partner, wants him to be successful, wants him to be proud of what he's doing, wants to help him out, wants him to do well. And so if she has some inkling of an idea of what he might be trying to lead, especially in the early stages of the dance, she may try to help him out by fixing it or doing what he's trying to do, as opposed to what he's actually leading. And so her responsibility, her principle, is to understand that he needs her to follow him in a pure fashion, so that he gets the feedback that he needs to make the adjustments and corrections that he needs to make, so that he can strengthen himself as well. So it strengthens his ability. It strengthens his ability to communicate clearly. It strengthens his proficiency. It strengthens his level of mastery. When, if something is not working out, he gets to see it, and then he has to make adjustments. It doesn't help him to make him look good when he's not doing well, because number one, it might hurt you, because if his energy is moving in one direction, but you're trying to fix it, you might actually have put yourself outside of the flow of the energy into some place that's unsafe. So he may be sending you, if you're looking in the video, he may be sending you over here because there's somebody over here. And you may say, oh, well, he's trying to do an ocho. So you step in that direction and actually take yourself or the couple into harm's way. The other thing is it doesn't make him successful outside of the couple. So if he thinks that he's doing well in a certain area in kind of in private, because you're making it right for him, but then when he goes out into the world and he must perform, whether in dance or in any other area, but he hasn't learned that what he's doing is actually not what he's leading is actually not the outcome that he is getting. Or how would I say, in other words, what he's leading is not actually what's coming out. If you've been fixing it for him, then if he goes into another environment, his expectation is he's got it when he actually doesn't have it. So you actually might be weakening him in future experiences, because he's thinking he's a great leader, and then he gets out in another environment where he has to demonstrate his leadership, and he's actually a horrible leader, and he had no idea that he was a horrible leader. So it's really, really important for the ladies not to do that. It's also, gentlemen, it's very, very important for you to be aware that that's her role. One of the things I love about Tango, and one of the reasons that I've been able to rise in the ranks as a professional, and one of my claims to fame, is that I am world renowned for being a pure follower, like a masterful follower, because of the purity of my following. And gentlemen all around the world that I've danced with, from beginner to professional to master, know that they lead me to do something, that what I'm going to do is exactly to the millimeter. I'm going to do exactly what is led, no more, no less. If he didn't give me enough energy for that baleo, if he didn't give me enough energy for it to pop and fly, and it's kind of lackadaisical, or it's not enough power, then that baleo is going to look limp. I'm not going to fix it and make it all nice and crisp and clean. Like what you What the gentleman gets from me is a direct and pure reflection of his lead, so that he not only knows exactly what's going on, but that I am in complete step with him, because my accuracy also allows me to be very, very in sync with him. Another way is, if I'm dancing with a leader, my dance as a follower does not look the same way as it does when I'm dancing with a professional. And I know this is really important, especially on my followers side, because whenever you see a lady, even if she's a professional and her dance looks the same, whether she's dancing with someone who just started dancing today, or she's dancing with someone who's been dancing 100 years or 50 years or however many years, there's a problem there. That lets me know that she has not mastered her following, because she should be a mirror reflection of the lead of her partner. If a gentleman who is a brand new dancer is struggling to step, it's not that I'm going to struggle to step, but I'm going to be a reflection of all the nuances of him learning is going to show up in how I execute what's going on. I'm still going to still have the key principles in place in terms of what it means to lead and follow, but I'm not going to look like a master instructor is leading me if I'm dancing with a brand new beginner leader. If that makes any sense. So you want to be pure in your following, and it gives him pure feedback. And this is also important for gentlemen, because you got to understand that your lady her goal is not to make you look good. Her goal is to make you be good. She's not here to make you look good and just fake it for you. She's here to make you better through her feedback, whether direct or indirect. She's here to strengthen you. She's here to fortify you. She's here to support you to becoming a greater and greater leader. And when you understand that, you will appreciate the feedback that you get from her, because that is her role in the dance. Her role in the dance in terms of the interaction with you, even though she does provide leadership in a different form, is to give you feedback when you are in the space of leading or generating the power. I've already said she's not only supposed to be sensitive, but she's supposed to be responsive, and that will show up in her accuracy. She translates purely, she provides feedback. And then the last thing that the lady is responsible is for executing one step at a time. So the gentleman is responsible for leading one step at a time, but the lady is responsible for executing one step at a time. It doesn't matter how many more steps or ideas she can sense that he wants to lead next. Her role and her goal is to execute one step at a time, because that's all she can do. She can only finish the step that he led, so that she can be ready and in the right position and in the right alignment to execute the next step. And I say, for my advanced dancers, the gentleman may, because he knows that he may manipulate that and use the momentum to kind of speed things up. But even if he does, her role is still to execute the step that he led. She is to execute one step at a time, each element that he has led, and he's responsible for negotiating the rest. So if he led me to take a side step, I'm going to focus on finishing, starting, and going through the process and completing that side step. I'm not worried about the pivot. I'm not worried about the forward step. I'm going to bring that side step into technical completion before I get myself and my mind and my body and my energy ready for the next step. I may sense the lead forward, but I still have to continue the execution of what was already set in motion, because there's energy that was sent in that direction. So if the gentleman led me sideways, he sent energy through me to go sideways. So guess what? That energy is still traveling sideways until I finish executing what happens before the change of direction of energy occurs. If that makes any sense, if you can kind of begin to visualize that. So these are the roles, these are the principles, the rules that govern the roles of the unit that is now the Partnership of Tango. So I know that that is a very, very involved, detailed primer of the principles and the rules that govern the role of that kind of oversee the partnership. But I think you can already begin to hear a lot of the dynamics that occur in relationship, things that occur naturally, things where places break down. And when people start talking about or asking me questions about whether or not traditional or gender roles are outdated or things like that, I just like to bring them back to this and like, let's just talk about the fundamentals. Let's just talk about the design of things. And then we can get into the other discussions. So I'm hoping that what you've heard has already started to kind of get your wheels turning in terms of kind of the things, the rules that govern the roles of your partnership, both on and off the dance floor of your relationships. I'm Linda Sutton, who's been talking with you about the anatomy of a tango today, focusing on principles. And as we say on the 2 to Tango show, it not only takes 2 to tango, but absolutely, it takes you to tango. Ciao.
We have just concluded another moving episode of the 2 to Tango show with Linda Sutton. Did you enjoy the show? If so, head over to the2totangoshow.com and discover a whole array of resources to help you spice up your relationship in every way. That's tangoshow.com. We would also like to hear from you, so don't forget to leave a review or feedback. Join us again next week for another entertaining and fun episode. Until then,